Hello and welcome to another edition of Theology Thursday. Today I want to talk about a subject that's very important to me and was a big part of my life. In order to graduate with a PhD, you have to write what's called a dissertation, which is essentially a massive research paper on a very narrow subject. So here's mine, an investigation of the relationship of theophanies to God's concealment by clouds in the Old Testament. And it is about 175-page research into God appearing in clouds in the Old Testament. So I just want to talk for a little bit about this subject, about God appearing in clouds in the Old Testament, and what it means and what it's all about. The word theophany is just a big word that comes from a couple Greek words that means God appears. So throughout the Old Testament, and even in the New Testament, of course, God appears to us. He appears as a human being when He meets with Abraham before He destroys Sodom and Gomorrah. He appears to Joshua as a warrior. He appeared to Isaiah on a throne and surrounded by all the seraphim in Isaiah chapter 6. To Ezekiel, God appeared in a number of kind of bizarre ways, unusual type of ways. He appears in visions and dreams, and appears as a human being who wrestles with Jacob at the brook Penuel. Probably the most famous theophany, the most famous appearance of God in the Old Testament is found in the burning bush, when God appeared to Moses in the burning bush that was not consumed and spoke to him and called him to go be the deliverer of the people from Egypt. Of course, the most important appearing of God would be through the person of Jesus Christ. He is the ultimate revelation of God to us. But I want to talk today mostly about this Old Testament idea of God appearing, particularly in clouds, and more specifically in the pillar of cloud. So the most common way that God appeared to people physically in the Old Testament was in the pillar of fire and cloud. There are many scholars, matter of fact, the majority of scholars believe that there were two clouds. There was or two pillars. There was the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire, one for the day and one for the night. But actually, Exodus 14:24 tells us that God looked down through the pillar of fire and cloud. So we know that it was one pillar that was composed of at least 3 layers, and I believe 4 layers, because God looked through this pillar. So we know that God's on the inside, and then we have layers beyond that. To try to help us understand this, I've got a couple of graphics. So at the center of the pillar, we have God Himself. But God, typically in the Bible, surrounds Himself with His glory. It's a brightness, much like what they saw on the Mount of Transfiguration when Jesus was changed before them and you could see His real glory. Then around that we have a column of fire. So we have God surrounded by His glory, surrounded by fire, and then around that we have the cloud, so that we have 4 layers: God, glory, fire, and cloud. I'll give it to you in a more simplified version here. We have God, who has a layer of glory around Him, who has a layer of fire around Him, who has a layer of cloud around Him. And so this would have been what the pillar of cloud was composed of, these 4 layers. So what you would have is during the daytime, people would see the cloud. Then at night, they would see the brightness of the fire shining through the cloud. So during the day, it looked like a pillar of cloud. At night, it looked like a pillar of fire. So that's sort of the composition. So what was the purpose of the pillar of cloud? How did it function? What did it do? And then why did God appear in this pillar of cloud? So I want to address all 3 of those issues. First of all, what was the purpose of the pillar of cloud and fire? Well, it served actually 2 purposes. One of them was to reveal the presence of God. People could see physically that God was with them. As a matter of fact, when the temple was dedicated in 2 Chronicles 7, we read that the cloud filled the temple so much that the priest had to leave the building because the presence of God was so tangible there in the temple. We read the same thing in Exodus 40. The same thing happened when the tabernacle was commissioned. And so this pillar represented the presence of God. The Bible says that Moses would go out and would meet with God in the tent of meeting, and the pillar of cloud would descend, and Moses would talk with God as a man talks to another man face to face, like he'd have an actual conversation with God. And so we read that one of the functions was to reveal the presence of God, but the other function was to hide the presence of God. It's impossible for you and me to see God, first of all because He's Spirit, and secondly because of His holiness and His purity. If we were to actually see Him, it would cost us our lives. And so the pillar, it reveals God, but also protects the glory of God, or protects us from the absolute glory and majesty of God, which would cause us as sinful human beings to die in His presence. And so it has that dual function of revealing and concealing God. So then that leads to, well, what did the pillar of cloud do? The pillar of cloud we find primarily in two locations. One is leading the people. So the pillar would be out in front and they would follow in the wilderness, and then when they got to a place that they were to stay, the pillar would stop and they would camp there, and they would stay there sometimes for years until the pillar moved again. And so through the pillar of cloud, God would lead His people, and they knew He was leading and where He wanted them to go because they could see it, it was there physically. The second place we see it is on the Day of Atonement, when the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies and offer the sacrifice on the mercy seat. The pillar of cloud would descend, which would indicate that God and human beings could actually meet as a result of a sacrifice that was offered. That, of course, is very important for us when we think about the New Testament, that Jesus offered His own blood so that we could be in fellowship with God. And so it would show that God was present there on that day. In the New Testament, Jesus, interestingly enough, is going to return with the clouds of glory, which may again be a reference to the pillar of cloud that God revealed Himself with. So that was the purpose, to reveal and conceal God all at the same time. It functioned to lead them and then to show God's presence and acceptance of the sacrifice on the Day of Atonement. But that leads to the real question, why a pillar of fire and cloud? Why did God choose as His primary vehicle of revealing Himself in the Old Testament a cloudy pillar? Well, there are two reasons, as we often find in the Bible. One is a practical reason and the other is a theological. So let me address the practical reason first. If God appeared as, say, a lion, like He does in the Chronicles of Narnia with Aslan, it'd be really hard to see Him unless you were up close. If God appeared as a human being, it'd be difficult to see Him. But when God appears as this giant pillar that goes way up into the sky, and actually a couple of passages seem to indicate that it formed a canopy at the top to protect them from the sun, you can see it from everywhere in the camp. Matter of fact, you can probably see it from miles away. Not only would it be very visible from a distance, but it would be very clear that it is the presence of God, and very unique because they were in the wilderness. There are no clouds. They're in the desert. There are no clouds. It's sunshiny 360 days out of the year. And so the pillar would be very visible and very obvious. So practically speaking, that is an excellent form for God to reveal Himself through, so that the people could see it from everywhere and could really draw and capture their attention. But there's also a theological reason why God would appear in the form of a cloud, and that comes from the Ten Commandments. If you remember the Ten Commandments, it starts off with, I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. You will have no other gods before me. Number one. Number two, you will not make unto yourself any graven image or any likeness. Things in heaven, things in earth, things in earth, things creep on the earth. For the Lord your God is a jealous God, and all of that. So the command against idolatry is, you will not make anything in the shape of God, in the image or the likeness of God. If God appears again as a lion, we can make a statue of a lion. If God appeared as a bear, we can make a statue of a bear. If God appeared as an eagle, we could make an idol that looks like an eagle. But how in the world do you make an idol that looks like a pillar of cloud? Do Do you take a bunch of cotton balls and glue them together? I believe the primary reason why God chose clouds is because it would be very, very difficult to make an idol out of a cloud. Also, people, eagles, animals, tree, they all have attributes. They get connected with God. So God soars above us like an eagle. He's majestic. God is strong and powerful like a lion. God is immovable and permanent like a rock, a big giant stone mountain, all those kind of things. The problem is those limit the nature of God and the character of God to just those particular attributes. But when you think of a cloud, you don't think of attributes like strong or wise or immovable or permanent. You just think clouds. This is the pillar of cloud. So theologically, by doing it in a cloud, it's very difficult to make an idol. You don't restrict God to just a few attributes that will be represented by that. It really is the perfect medium for God to reveal Himself to His people. And so the idea of God revealing Himself in clouds, particularly the pillar of fire and cloud, is very, very significant because it both reveals the presence of God but also conceals Him for our protection so that we don't gaze upon Him and die. It would lead the people and would show that God would accept their sacrifice, and then it reminds us theologically of the greatness of God, and we should look to Him, but also that we could not make an idol out of it. So I think that is the primary reasons that God has revealed Himself in the Old Testament in the pillar of cloud and fire. Of course, for you and me, we're not really looking for that because we have Jesus, the ultimate revelation. But we do look for the day that Jesus shall return in the clouds of glory. But I do think that clouds in the Old Testament are very, very interesting. Let me just say one other thing. If you are interested, I think this thing is somewhere on the internet. However, it's full of a lot of Hebrew words and some other foreign words as well. So it's rather difficult to read and, to be honest with you, rather boring. My own mom didn't even read it. She tried, and so I doubt you'd want to do that. But I just wanted to give you kind of the summary in a capsule of what 2 years of research produced. So I want us to end with this great thought. The fact that all the reasons for pillar and cloud and everything, the really cool thing is God desires to be with His people. And He showed that through the pillar of fire and cloud. And the great hope for you and me is that God wants to be with His people. And someday we will be with Him in heaven. So that pillar of cloud is just kind of a foretaste, sort of a preview of God's presence with His people that we'll experience in all of His glory in heaven. So God bless you, and I hope again that you have a great day.